And I'm going to introduce our third student presenter, Christian James, who is a master's student at the University of Maryland, College Park, and he also is Digital Curation Fellow at the National Agricultural Library. Christian earned his master's degree in history from George Mason University and has worked for the Center for Population Economics at the University of Chicago and at ProQuest. His paper is titled Historical Thinking, Digital Methods, the New History Pedagogy, and he is reviewing major recent research publications in the field of history that promote the teaching of historical thinking with digital technology. Christian, the mic is yours.
Hi, how's it sound? Hello? Is there no audio? Oh, okay. Oh, great. Thanks for the feedback, guys. Good afternoon. Thank you to the special interest group, to both special interest groups for the opportunity to deliver this presentation. As Christina said, my name is Christian James. I'm an MLS candidate at University of Maryland, College Park. And the title of my paper is Historical Thinking, Digital Methods, and New Pedagogy. This paper is basically a review essay of several books and essays that I've just read over the last couple months and the recurring themes and connections between them. Before writing the essay, I'd already planned on reading Sam Wineburg's book, Historical Thinking and Other Unnatural Acts, John Fia's Why Study History, and T. Mills Kelly's Teaching History in the Digital Age. And Wineburg's influence is very clearly stated in both of these books and both of these other books, and the connections were so rich that I felt that this analysis would be a good basis for a review essay. So after deciding to write the essay, I also conducted some supplementary research and noticed more connections with some other essays that I'd seen online lately, especially the work of James Grossman, director of the American Historical Association. My paper argues that Sam Wineburg's 2001 book and its theory of what he calls historical thinking, while having nothing to do with digital history or digital humanities, has directly inspired a number of historians to use new digital methods for history instruction. So, as you'd see in my abstract, the paper discusses the concept of historical thinking, these connections with recent digital history proponents, and then concludes with some connections to the LIS field. I make a secondary argument that as these digital history proponents become more invested in the concepts of information literacy and information systems, they converge with the LIS field, and that both historians and information professionals should collaborate on both research areas. I think this is a good fit for the theme of the conference because it probes the relationship between digital technology and the humanities. The educators I discuss here intend to use technology to teach students about the human condition. Before I proceed, I should offer a caveat. Because this is a review essay, it may not necessarily be indicative of the state of the field of history. I'm not discussing the consensus of historians, just the recent works of a handful of them. The majority of history teachers in K-12 schools and higher education may not be using digital tools as major components of their curriculum. Another caveat is that probably not all digital historians are consciously inspired by the concept of historical thinking and vice versa. But my findings do suggest that the authors cited here represent a sort of vanguard in history education reform. So what is historical thinking? To my knowledge, there's no short, concise definition available, but Wineburg gives the concept several attributes in his 2001 book, pictured here. Here, historical thinking is the concept that the past is a foreign country, in the words of novelist L.P. Hartley, with mentalities that are separate from ours and only understandable once we study and empathize with them. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. Empathy is a major theme in these writings. The concept of mentalities is drawn from the Annales school of mid-20th century European historians. Another important characteristic is that Wineburg defines historical thinking in opposition to traditional methods of history teaching that rely on memorizing facts and listening to lectures. So historical thinking is about ditching the lecture and studying primary sources to gain insight into the attitudes of historical subjects. As I've already indicated, I've chosen in my paper to use empathy as a sub-theme. It's often cited as a main component of historical thinking, and in the context of this paper, I think it's important because it returns to the idea of the humanities by addressing the humanness of historical subjects. The authors described here use technology to explore the human condition and promote empathy. So Wineburg's 2001 book, where he describes the idea of historical thinking, actually doesn't discuss digital tools. But a few years later, Wineburg collaborated with the Center for History and New Media on the website for teaching historical resources, historicalthinkingmatters.org. In an essay that I've cited in the paper, Wineburg and his colleagues explained that this site is intended not merely to be a clearinghouse for documents like primary sources or lesson plans, but an interactive resource that takes advantage of the unique aspects of the web medium, such as extensible markup language and textual annotation through things like on-mouse over design elements. I'll now move on to some of the historians who've drawn on Wineburg's writings. John Fia's Why Study History is a concise synthesis of various ideas about studying the past from the major scholarly historiography, along with several chapters on Fia's views on the value of the past. Fia directly cites Wineburg. He thinks that historical thinking has practical applications in the real world by preparing undergraduate students for democracy in a diverse society with values like tolerance and mutual understanding. He also thinks that history prepares undergraduates with both critical thinking and hands-on skills. Fia is one of the leaders of the Digital Harrisburg Project, based on Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is near Fia's Messiah College, where he's the history department chair. This project has several aspects, including creating digital exhibits, geotagging, and mining census data, as well as local oral history. Another historian that makes similar connections between historical thinking and digital methods is T. Mills Kelly. His recent book, Teaching History in the Digital Age, discusses other ways that students can conduct their own original historical research and present them digitally, from digital videos to blogs and wikis. He's also concerned with teaching undergraduates to critically evaluate historical evidence, which is arguably more difficult in a digital environment. Kelly caps this off with a discussion of his Lying About the Past course, in which his class of undergraduates fabricated a story about a fictitious pirate named Edward Owens. Their story went viral before it was exposed as a hoax. And while this was controversial, and rightly so, it was a clever way to explore the nature of historical evidence in digital environments. The last historian I'll discuss helps prove that there's institutional backing for the reforms that Wineburg, Fia, and Kelly advocate. James Grossman, the director of the American Historical Association, has been vocally supportive of innovative courses such as these. He's been vocal in the last year or so in a number of non-historical venues, including the New York Times, where he's supported recent controversial reforms to the advanced placement U.S. history curriculum, citing historical thinking and empathy as his reasons. Grossman has also been a champion of Fia's Digital Harrisburg Project and has cited it as a model of this new pedagogy. Since I've summed up the connections between these readings, it's time to take a step back and examine the implications for the library and information science field. As I indicate in my paper, and I've tried to point out here, each of these historians have expressed concern over information literacy in the digital age. Historians in general are typically concerned with evaluating evidence as a core competency, but these authors are especially interested in this competency in the digital age. They're also encouraging younger undergraduate students to perform more original documentary research, which has typically been reserved for graduate students. As this is happening, I argue that there's an emerging convergence between history and the information science field. I think that historians should understand more information theory, including information literacy and information-seeking behavior. Likewise, the information science and information studies field should study historiography and understand how historians evaluate evidence and promote information literacy, and the two fields should bridge this disciplinary divide. Another way that these fields are converging are in information systems, as history education becomes more project-based rather than lecture-based. Students will be creating databases and applying metadata. This has become easier with user-friendly open source software like Omeka. But if historians are going to understand and master these information systems, they should study their structure and design. And I should also mention that when I talk about convergence, I'm kind of borrowing that concept from Jennifer Trant, who talks about libraries, archives, and museums in the digital age and how they've sort of converged through their management of digital assets and in a digital context. And I've built upon that to talk about how the similar thing is happening between history and information science. So since this presentation format allows me to expand a little more on the ideas I've discussed in the paper, I'm going to posit a few questions for further research. These are not in the paper as I've submitted it to the competition, but they're nonetheless important to the conversation. I've demonstrated how these contemporary historians have showed the correlation between historical thinking and digital technology. However, I'm not convinced that they've successfully argued for a theory connecting the two concepts. There should be more work exploring in depth the connections between the affordances of digital tools and historical thinking skills like empathy. Computers might connect us to primary sources, but they can also wall us off from mass society. So is there any net effect of computers and digital technology? That's something that these historians could study, and that they should make that connection more explicit. To put digital tools aside for a moment, the concepts of empathy and historical thinking should be explored further too. Historians have relied so much on Wineburg's work that they should perhaps step back and reevaluate the concept of historical thinking and maybe offer a more rigorous definition. Empathy itself has a number of detractors who I allude to very briefly in the paper. These critics say that empathy can lead to sentimentalization, or argue that humans can't actually ever completely drop their own biases and empathize completely. So exploring these critiques would be another valuable study. Finally, I think it would also be valuable to discuss who should really have the digital methods in the classroom. K through 12 students, undergraduate students, or both. Wineburg and Grossman talk about K through 12 students, and Via and Kelly discuss undergraduates. It would be a good idea for educators to know what points in students' education are the best for introducing this type of work. So that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank the special interest groups again for the opportunity, and I'll take any questions now, time allowing. Thank you.
Christian, thank you very much. We don't actually have any questions in the chat window. Please double check. No, we don't. Any questions for Christian? If not, let me thank you very much, our presenters, for joining us and presenting your research papers. As Sandy Hirsch mentioned, we are really excited to tap into the student research activities and have a platform for this symposium for their presentations. Jeremy, I think I'm going to turn the session to you. There is one question actually in the chat. Do we have a link to your paper? I believe at this point we don't have actually a platform or a repository, and this was one of the topics here, but at this point we don't. We discussed providing some kind of a proceedings for this symposium, and I can see that Jeremy is typing in the chat window that eventually we will. So I think we are going to work on that. So again, let me thank our presenters. This was really a wonderful opportunity to have them to present. And Jeremy, I'm turning to you. Thank you.